China doesn't invade, it invests. China is in a competition with itself. Meanwhile, our propaganda is telling us that China's trying to take over the world.
Hello amazing viewer, delighted to have you at Comfort for Life, where I bring to you a compilation of TikTok videos together with the famous social medias for educational purposes. So we are here for educational purposes. To my returning viewers, I love and appreciate you for your immense love, continued support. So if you're new here, don't hesitate to subscribe to my channel. I came across this video on my For You page on TikTok.
I just did a video about this that I just took down because I was watching it and it's like, I can explain this clear. It was in response to a comment that said, China doesn't invade, it invests. That comment, I'm sure, is referencing a bunch of things, especially the Iraq-Afghanistan war versus the Chinese investment in the Belt and Road project at the same time. It could also be referencing America's investment in its military systems and China's investment in infrastructure and education. But I think this also speaks to a deeper cultural difference between the Chinese and Americans, and I would say most Western settler colonial cultures. Americans, settler colonial cultures, are invaders. We are invaders. We invade, we take over your country, we drain it dry, and we enslave your people. This is how America exists. This is why this white face is here. Nothing I can do about that now. That ship has sailed, no pun intended. The thing in Chinese history, which is massive, that I keep coming back to, and I've been trying to read up and study about this as much as I possibly can over the last few years, as like the propaganda wars have gotten worse and worse and worse. I wanted to basically understand China better. So I've been reading as much as I possibly can. This whole Red Note thing has been incredible. There are so many just average Chinese people on there who have a really deep and sophisticated understanding of their 4,000 to 5,000 year old history as compared to like our 200-300 year old history. It's very illuminating. It's very, there's more for me to learn than I have time for right now. But I will just give one simple little story, which is the treasure fleets of Shanghai. Shanghai was a eunuch who worked for a Chinese emperor, and I'm forgetting the emperor's name, and I forget the dynasty, but you can look it up. The treasure fleets was the biggest fleet ever made by man at that time, containing the biggest boats ever made by man at that time. Massive, Chinese-style galleons. I think some of them had 5 masts. They were just enormous. And the whole idea behind this fleet, and it was hundreds of boats, the idea behind this fleet, China was not a seafaring nation, really. Like, they just kind of stayed in their own little pond, like the East China Sea. The whole idea behind this fleet was to go out over the horizon and make contact with new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. So they did this at enormous expense. It was a civilizationally ruiningly expensive endeavor for them to do, coupled with expanding the Great Wall at the exact same time. These fleets went out to uncontacted civilizations, and did they invade these people? Did they enslave these people? Did they attack these people? No. They went to uncontacted people, they made first contact, and then they showed them some of the wonders that they had brought in their boats, and then they gave it to them, and they said, cool, look at all the shit that we can do. Aren't we awesome? Yeah, I told you so. We're pretty great. What do you have? What's so cool about you guys? Show me your shit. And then they would take the stuff that they liked best out of that back to the emperor, and the emperor would be like, cool. It was very much that Rick and Morty meme of like, show me what you got. So that whole endeavor was so expensive that it basically bankrupted the country, and the regular people in China were suffering. There was extreme extraction being perpetrated down upon them by the imperial court and the eunuchs. They rose up and, deposed the emperor, and a new emperor emerged and took everything over as a direct result of this profligate spending, I guess. Now, what do Europeans do when they get their galleons together? They start chopping off hands when they don't get gold in the first 10 minutes. And the very next thing they do after that is that they go make sure they have a hold full of slaves. We are getting propaganda that China is going to take over the world. China's not going to take over the world. China has never wanted to take over the world. China just wants to be, feeling itself. China is in a competition with itself. It kind of always has been. It went through a period of humiliation. What do they call it? 100 years of humiliation after basically the British showed up and basically acted like drug dealers. It would be as if the British, can you imagine this? Drug dealers show up, get everyone in the country addicted. I know, what would that be like? And then take over the government and make the states fight each other. By the way, everybody on Red Note is comparing our moment in history to that moment in their history. Meanwhile, our propaganda is telling us that China's trying to take over the world. China is just doing well, and we're not. Okay, so I feel like I need to respond to this and other comments that have come up on the last couple of videos I made discussing China and the changing views that the rest of the world has about China versus the United States and vice versa. I've been accused of China glazing. I've been accused of lots of stuff. And I want to basically state clearly here that I do not put the government of any country on a pedestal. I believe that the people are the important part basically everywhere. That said, you do have to contrast the styles of governance that we have in the United States with what has been happening in China in recent years. And in that comparison, the United States comes out much worse. We are not being led by the best of us. That's for damn sure. As Jarvis Cocker has said, shit floats. What I think is making most people in the West, and particularly America, relatively uncomfortable is the fact that Chinese netizens are now learning to do the exact same thing that is happening here, which is saying, wait, the American people are beautiful, but their government is absolutely brutal to them. Can you believe what they do to those poor people? And you have throngs of people here who go, yeah, I know, right? Because they feel like they're being heard and seen for the first time in fucking years, because no one in this country, at least in a position of power, has been hearing or seeing the disadvantaged, the working class, just the regular assholes on the street, have been left behind by politics here. So I don't know if the next century is going to be China's century. I do know that most of the centuries preceding the last three were China's centuries. China was the largest and most sophisticated culture on Earth for most of its history. A lot of that, I believe, comes down to just really the staple crop, rice. Rice is just a much more efficient creator of calories. I forget what the statistics were, but you can have almost twice as many people survive off of the acreage that it takes to grow rice as it does on almost any other grain crop. So they had a head start from the jump. Add to that traditionally, like the Chinese lands were bordered on the north and west by the steppes, by the Mongolian raiders. So they have a wealth of historical precedent of being invaded, being conquered, being brutalized. And basically this seems to have created a psychology in which they just really want to hold on to what they got, keep it safe and secure, and build sophistication on top of sophistication rather than go out and conquer. That's what the Mongols do. There's a great term called schismogenesis that is from the David Graeber book, I think The Beginning of Everything, that basically is an anthropological term that he invented that says when you have two groups of people right next to each other and one is super patriarchal and harsh, and then most likely the other one is going to be the opposite of that because they're defining themselves in opposition to their most prominent neighbors. And all of this is not to say that there isn't brutality coming from the top down in Chinese culture. There has always been an incredible surplus of brutality in their history, just like there's been in ours. One of the things that shocked me in my reading was a passage that said, and I don't know if this is true, but a passage that stuck with me that said, Chinese typically do not consider a civil war to be all that worth noticing until people in the affected areas devolve into cannibalistic survival, which is an incredibly dark sentence. Just look at what happened in China during the Great Leap Forward, and some, and honestly, I don't know how much of what we've learned here in the West is true and how much of it is not true. I have no way to gauge it. I can only basically infer that, yes, it was a brutal process. There was a lot of starvation. There was a lot of mismanagement. Although I'll say, the more I read, it seems like the mismanagement happened in intermediary levels. And that tracks with Chinese history. This idea of the mandate of heaven, where the emperor, the guy at the top, is somewhat disconnected from the people, but at the same time, they are responsible for the happiness and well-being of the people that they are, ruling, more or less. So basically, if the people are unhappy, it's their job to go kill that guy, and he deserves it. He has lost the mandate of heaven if his people are unhappy. In the middle, in traditional Confucian society, you had the eunuchs, basically, right? The guys who were originally the only ones to be trusted around the harem, and then they later grew to take over most of the government. And then you also had a civil service it's a little blurry between those two. I don't know where one ends and the other one begins, but like there was a meritocracy. Like if you passed a test, then you got a kick-ass government job. And that's one hell of an incentive to sort of promote the best and brightest up from whatever social strata they happen to be born in. It's a little similar to what we were promised as kids here in America, except they were doing it like 2,000 years ago in China. So if you're going to say to me, oh man, there's corruption and there's problems, I'm going to say to you, yes, of course there is. Of course there is corruption and problems. There's corruption and problems literally everywhere. What concerns me is the fact that the corruption and the problems that I am living under and you are living under and the rest of us here in America are living under has reached psychedelic levels of insanity. We've lost the plot. And it's a bit shocking to us to look over our phones and see a place that we assumed was backwards, lapping us. That's a scary thing. And I can only hope that this is a wake-up call for us in the West, that maybe we should have listened to our first principles and promoted, education and investments in the future instead of relying on the sword and the gun. So in closing, it's Lunar New Year. It's the year of the wooden snake. So, 新年快乐. I hope I said that right. Happy New Year.
I brought this video here because I have a Chinese audience and I know that we are going to get clarification on the things that weren't well clarified and even some heresies or misconceptions that were spoken about in this video. So if there's any lie detected from this video, so I love my audience and they're going to address that. So I'm not here to address what is in this video, but as I listened, I realized that this is the most objective video I've ever come across since we started the Red Note discourse with people comparing China and the US. I've never seen any Chinese who speaks of them conquering the world. So people who are making such conclusions are Americans, Maybe that was the picture that they had of China when they see the development, when they see them evolving, So this video, I loved it because it's referred to history, and this is someone who took time to study Chinese history related to what is happening right now. So there are a lot of things. People say that we shouldn't refer to the DeepSeek situation with the open whatever information that are out there. We shouldn't refer to it as a war, but we should refer to it as a competition. Because as you can see, from what you've heard right here, Chinese are they're not invaders, but they are investors. They don't invade, but they invest. They innovate, they change, they show up. So this is just Chinese being them, and this is them showing what they got. Because from all the conversations I've heard of Chinese with Americans, the exchange they have heard has always been, let me show you my culture, let me show you how we do things, let me show you. But they never speak about them like deeply. They can ask questions and want to listen, but they don't want to really interfere with what is happening in people's country. They can comment, laugh about it, and maybe pity them, but they have never really gotten and start comparing their country to the US. No, I've not seen such videos, and if you've seen them, kindly link them for me right here. I want to see them as well. So that was it about this video, and the only thing that they're comparing is the propaganda that was fed by US citizens to the reality that they're living right now, to clarify their development to non-Chinese, that's Americans, and to the world in general, because that's what all of us thought China was, Yeah, so that was it about this video. Kindly leave your thoughts in the comment section. Let's have a conversation around this. Let's interact. You can as well support the channel, subscribe, like. Yeah, so many people ask me about how to support. There's a super thanks button right there. It's a heart button, so you can click there and follow as your pockets leads. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you.